New disabled facilities had been planned so pupils like him didn't have to miss lessons.
Just coming back into school, knowing how much hard work we have to do, because whilst I was in the wheelchair, it was all upper body strength, pushing my wheelchair around on a self-propelling one. And it was just such hard work to get around, going up hills, down hills, trying to hobble down some stairs if I could. It was just an absolute nightmare.
The biggest fear for the head teacher is that the state of the buildings could ultimately threaten the future of the school.
Obviously, it would be a concern for the future if students were to end up voting with their feet and going elsewhere because of the state of the buildings. But as things deteriorate here over the years, if something isn't done soon, that may become a serious issue for us.
The government says it understands people's disappointment, but the existing programme was wasteful and behind schedule. But they say it's not the end of school rebuilding, and a new review will focus spending in areas where the need is greatest. But in the meantime, the pupils here are in for some testing times ahead. Sophie van Bruggen, BBC News.
Coming up, the 1 o'clock news with Sophie Raworth. Before the weather, Dan Corbett.
Quite a bit of wet weather across the southeastern parts of Britain as we go through the course of the afternoon. Bear it in mind, going to be out and about, you'll probably need the wet weather gear. Some of us manage to dry up bright weather in places, but there will be the heavy showers. They'll work their way through, and particularly across southern and eastern areas, do watch for them. Quite a massive cloud, a swirl here. It's this lump here, area of low pressure, and all the moisture easing its way north, just grazing the far southeast of the British Isles. Further west than brighter skies, you'll see a few showers bubbling up here, but it's down across the far south and east. And notice the darker blues, the greens, some of the heavier downpours that develop. Could be thundery as well, maybe parts of Sussex towards Kent. Just over the next couple of hours, bear them in mind. And then further north and east to parts of East Anglia, we'll see more likely just some rain, a few heavier bursts in that. Go further north and west, it's a bit more patchy, if anything just showery, but brighter skies as we come into parts of northern England and most of Scotland, but still a fairly swift wind across the far north and east of Scotland. Come further south and west, brighter skies to western parts of Scotland. Not a bad afternoon here. And Northern Ireland, a few showers for you, but otherwise looking fairly decent. And over Wales, there probably won't be as many showers as, say, yesterday. It could be a few, maybe to say parts of Pembrokeshire, southern Wales, and down as well to southwest England. And some of the darker blues also might just see that odd heavier one bubbling up here and there for the heat of the day. So our lump of blue here, this is our weather system just bending in, but then it continues to churn its way north into the North Sea. Elsewhere, the showers that have developed, we lose their heating of the day, so they fizzle out quite nicely. And then for the most part, it is a quiet night, but this wet weather just sort of lurking in the North Sea. Numbers by morning, 11, 12 to 13. There could be some mist and fog as well, but it's particularly the areas that have seen that wet weather as we finish off the day, the air fairly moist. And then we're into Thursday. Fine, bright looking start. It's a quieter sort of day, really. A little nudge of high pressure building in, so with that, the showers that do bubble up, probably not as big, not as mean, not as heavy. A few here and there. Maybe some wet weather grazing the east coast, and temperatures 18, 19 to maybe 20 or 21 to finish off Thursday. So Thursday was because of that little nudge of high pressure. Friday is with this chappie here. He's going to come in wet weather, mainly for northern parts of Britain on Friday. The further south you are, you'll be fine and dry. Shouldn't be too bad. Bit of a breeze with this thing as well, and the wet weather's to northern areas, and the top numbers through the day, 17, 18 for Scotland, for Northern Ireland. Further south, low 20s. That's the weather for now.
Parking and barking.
And bus lines in Ealing.
Cab fares and phone scares to the city glass ceiling.
Bin bags in Belfast.
And roads in Dungannon.
House prices, rate rises.
Local down planning.
Places in Stirling.
And vices and Mull.
Fox hunting, fly tipping.
Grey squirrel cull.
Jobs in the valleys.
Tourists in rail. Hospital queues.
And the price of a fill.
Bank loans in Leicester.
And prisons in Preston.
Erosion in Poole. The West Lothian question. Tussles in Brussels. And planning permissions. Funding for London.
And farming and fishing.
Whatever issues you care about.
Wherever you are, we've got them covered.
The Politics Show with me, John Sopel, Sunday at 11 on BBC One.
Mechanical failures and human judgment are blamed for the Gulf of Mexico oil disaster. BP's own investigation says it wasn't just their fault and points the finger at a complex and interlinked series of events involving several companies. International condemnation as a small evangelical church in Florida plans to burn the Quran on the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The Prime Minister flies to France to be with his father, who's had a stroke while on holiday. An outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. Health experts try to find its source after one person dies and 11 others fall ill. And how men should strut their stuff. Scientists identify the dance moves that will attract women and the ones that won't.
And later in sport, Ferrari are at a Formula One hearing in Paris. Well, they'll find out this afternoon if they're to face further punishment for apparently using team orders at last month's German Grand Prix.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. The oil giant BP says it was not solely to blame for the Gulf of Mexico disaster in April. In an internal report, the company says a sequence of failures caused the largest oil spill in US history. And it says several companies, including BP, must share responsibility for the accident. Today's report is one of just a number of ongoing investigations into the Deepwater Horizon accident that killed 11 workers and leaked almost 5 million barrels of oil into the sea. John Mulhern reports.
It was a catastrophic incident that left almost a dozen people dead and unleashed the worst environmental disaster in US history. Politicians and industry bosses are still grappling with the fallout from it all. Now BP has published its long-awaited account of what happened and what exactly went wrong. The lengthy, detailed report has taken 3 months to compile and will likely make grim reading for all concerned. BP's report appears to spread the blame. It concludes that multiple companies and work teams contributed to the accident. And there were multiple causes too. It refers to a series of mechanical failures, human judgments, engineering design and team interfaces.
My initial impression is that it's chosen to be selective about the things that look as though they could be the responsibility of other companies without recognising what their own involvement in those decisions was, and you wouldn't expect that in this internal report.
It was on April 20th that an explosion ripped through the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig. 11 workers died, many more were injured. It resulted in the world's biggest accidental offshore oil spill. The long-term ecological impact is still unknown. BP's chief executive, Tony Hayward, took control, but after a series of ill-considered remarks, including,
"There's no one who wants this thing over more than I do. I'd like my life back."
He faced a barrage of criticism and lost his job. The gushing well was finally plugged last month, but not before almost 5 million barrels had leaked into the Gulf. BP has been damaged too. Clean-up, compensation and penalties could hit £20 billion. Its share price has tumbled. Much depends on whether the company is ultimately found to have been criminally negligent, but it accepts the repercussions of this will be far-reaching.
In every crisis there are things that one could have done differently, and I'm sure that once we're through all this we can look back and we can draw conclusions and we can learn from this.
BP's report is unlikely to go down well here in the Gulf. Thousands of jobs have been hit since the accident, and the mountain of litigation facing the firm is rising. John Moylan,